Hello, and welcome to the Spirit Vessel Conversation Series, Professionals' Perspectives in Deathcare. My name is Jessica Wirtz, the founder of Spirit Vessel, and we're so glad you're here with us today. The Professionals' Perspectives in Deathcare series is centered around conversations with professionals of all types in the deathcare and emotional wellness space. These conversations aim to bring awareness, acceptance, and normalization to the death and grieving process. If you enjoy these conversations, please consider sharing them on your favorite social media platform, and be sure to sign up for our newsletter so that you'll be the first to know when a new conversation is released. With me today is my sister and Spirit Vessel co-founder, Amanda McClellan, and we are joined by our guest, Joèl Simone Anthony.
Joèl Simone Anthony, known as the Grave Woman, is a licensed funeral director, sacred grief practitioner, and life insurance agent. Joèl has served in the funeral service industry for over a decade and specializes in helping guide individuals, families, businesses, and governmental agencies to navigate uncomfortable and difficult conversations about death, dying, end of life, funeral, and burial planning. Joèl is the author of a number of educational courses on the topics of grief and death care, and we could not be more excited to have her here today. So welcome, Joèl, and thanks for being here.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, we're excited. So for our listeners and for Jess and myself, how did you come into this work? So a little bit about your background and how you got here.
That is such a loaded question, but it's answer. Long story short, God, spirit, the universe, source, whatever you identify with is the creator, the all, is how I got into this. Death, dying, transition, and grief have been a part of my existence since I was born. Much like all of us. I mean, that's the truth for all of us. But to be more specific, I've always been very morbidly curious. And I had the honor of having what you call a master embalmer and mortician as an uncle. So I had some very strong in-house influence growing up, and all of my questions about what happens to our bodies when we die. Why is this person laying down? Why do we go look at them? Why are we putting them in the ground? All of those questions that my child mind could think of, my uncle did the best to not only answer, but follow up with questions that caused me to frame my own perspective about death and dying. In addition to that, I grew up in Beaufort, South Carolina, which is the heart of the Gullah and Geechee culture. And for those of you all who may not be familiar, the Gullah and Geechee culture is basically the culture of all African American people in this country. The Port Royal Sound is here in Beaufort, South Carolina, and it is where we as enslaved people, as African Americans, or enslaved Africans were brought here into the United States. So a lot of our cultural, our ritual, our ceremony, our practice, as it relates to everyday life, but especially death and dying, is still housed here in this area. So a combination of family influence, morbid curiosity, and my culture brought me into this practice.
That's awesome. So when did you know? So you went through school and high school, and then how did that, transition from there?
Well, just to back up a little bit, I spent tons of time with my uncle at the funeral home as a kid. So even before going to high school, I think in elementary school, I knew I wanted to do something with death and dying. But after graduating high school, I actually went to college for business administration. I thought I was going to be a hospital administrator or owning a hair salon or something like that. But that's not how life took me. I think 3 days after graduating from college, I got my first job fresh out of college in a cemetery. So yeah, it was like, whoop, yep, we're back.
Yep. You're trying to go this way and just spirit just calling you back to, where you're supposed to be. I love it.
Yeah.
So how about the name The Grave Woman? We're so curious. Where did that come from?
Again, childhood influence. The only explanation I have is that it came from spirit. I have a picture that I drew when I was 8 years old that my grandmother saved and put into a like a memory book for me when I left home after high school. And I did not see this picture for, it must have been 8 years. I was in mortuary school at the time, and my sister was helping me clean out some images, and or not images, some stuff. And she found the book, and in the book were other things that I've drawn. But there was a picture of me standing in a cemetery, holding a microphone in front of me, talking to the grave, saying, "I am the grave woman." And I drew that picture when I was 8 years old. Think about it. I'll send you guys a picture after this is done.
That is so cool. I have a daughter who's 8 years old right now. So just to think about you doing it at that age is really cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, your story is just so wild and deep and profound to me, because I just feel like your ancestral work, like this is so rooted in your ancestry. And, just so many of us come into the world wondering, what is my path? What am I doing here? And how am I, adding something to the world of purpose and meaning? And when I hear your story, it's just like, oh girl, you brought that spark right in with you. And it's just been quite loud. It sounds like, you've been really given quite loud signs throughout your childhood in the direction you would be moving. And it just feels really, really powerful to hear a story like this. Can you talk a little bit more about your uncle? Because I just feel like, what a mentor, at such an early age, and what a guide to have, and just have these conversations with him. Because so many children, oh my God, as we all know at this point, it's just like, you don't get these questions answered. You get them answered at the 8th hour of something falling apart and losing, a loved one. And then this conversation gets tabled. But for you to be able to speak to him and hear his stories and just have that experience as a child must have been really incredible. And I'm just curious, like, as an embalmer, he could speak to the physical side of the body, but it sounds to me like he also was very spirit led, and he was really speaking to a deeper sense of spirituality in loss and in grieving.
100%. My Uncle Mark was just a phenomenal person, and unfortunately he's no longer here. But I mean, I can just close my eyes and remember going into the embalming room with him for the first time. And there's like this feeling of nervousness, excitement. I don't know what I'm going to see. Everyone else is afraid of this place, but my uncle's not afraid. So I don't have to be afraid. And the first thing he said to me was that this is a sacred space. When you enter this space, you enter it with respect for not only those that are here, but those that we're also taking care of, meaning the family. And just seeing our spirit vessel, your name, the name of your company, our being laying on a table, but that spirit being absent, it just fascinated me. And of course, I had millions of questions, like, is this still a person? What is going to happen with their body? And then watching him go through the embalming process and watching him take care with cosmetizing and grooming and just doing all the little details that as a child, I'm thinking I do this every day. If someone, like when I get sick and Nani, which is my grandma, does this for me, does that mean I died? Just trying to process those things and having those conversations with him, and him really helping me differentiate between what life and death represent. But in a way that, like I said, caused me to think about it on my own, not answer the question for me. It's just so many memories. I remember he worked, I think at this time in Tallahassee, Florida, and we rode down to, I think, another part of, I can't remember the city in Florida, but this little boy had died. He had cancer. And I remember there was a flashlight in the casket with the young man. And I'm like, well, if he's dead, then why does he need a flashlight? And I remember my uncle explaining to me that the flashlight wasn't for him. It was for his mom, so that she would know he wasn't in the dark. Mm-hmm. And that defining for me that, okay, even in death, comfort is still needed, or we still have to give comfort to those that are left behind. I mean, just so many things he said without saying them. And more importantly, the example he gave, not only in the way that he treated the deceased, but also the living. I mean, I can talk about my uncle all day. I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. I just get chills when you talk about these experiences that you've had, and mostly the ones that he's enabled you to have, which is just, it's so wonderful. It's so wonderful that was your experience, and that this is the level of care and intention that you take into your work, because he enabled you to see these multiple perspectives of death and grieving, and sharing that with a family. And I love the little symbolisms of comfort too that we take with us. It just, it really, to me, feels like it doesn't end at death, does it? Like it's just a cycle, and we're just in this cycle together. So how do we help one another cycle through it? And to your work, and I'm just so curious to hear you talk more about, like, once you graduated high school, did you say in 3 days you were working in a cemetery? That is
after college, after graduating college.
Okay, yeah. Sure. Okay, good. Okay. And Can you talk a little bit about that? I'm just like picking up from the story, like where were you, and where does this story go from here?
Certainly. So I graduated from Strayer University in 2010. I think I graduated on like March 27th, and by April 3rd, I think I'd been hired. And I remember on April 4th going to Crestlawn Memorial Park, which is in the heart of Atlanta, Georgia. If you're ever there, it has the most beautiful skyline view of Atlanta that you'll ever see in the city. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I just remember starting that first day at the cemetery thinking, oh my gosh, this is really what I'm supposed to be doing, but it's not necessarily what I want to do. But I worked as a family service counselor for about a year. Because of the way the entity that I worked for was set up, Crestlawn they have the north side of the city, which does a certain demographic, and the south side of the city, which does a certain demographic. Crestlawn was right in the middle of the city. So we got to take care of families that were Asian, were Jewish, were Muslim, were African-American, white, Hispanic. So it was just a melting pot of culture and diversity. And what I realized in working with all these families is that the way that we mourn, or the way that we grieve, the words that we say may be a little bit different, but at the core of what we do is this spiritual essence of celebrating someone's life and trying to figure out what the hell we're supposed to do next. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite parts of that job, believe it or not, was not actually the cemetery aspect, standing the services, making sure that the graves were dug, finding the graves, helping people find their loved ones in the cemetery, but it was actually the pre-planning aspect where I got to go out into the community and host workshops and knock on people's doors and have conversations with them about pre-planning for their end of life and funeral and burial needs. And that is when it clicked for me that, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is why I'm here. And I need to go to school and figure out how to do this on a much grander scale. Mm-hmm. And so I think about a year and a couple weeks later, the cemetery started having conversations about being sold because the numbers weren't that great. At the end of the day, the Deathcare business is just that, a business. So the entity was thinking about selling to another entity, and they had to get rid of our team. So basically we got laid off. I was devastated. I cried like a baby upon being laid off, but it opened the door for me to attend mortuary school a few months later. And we were talking about how everything is spirit-led and divine. The date on the picture that says I'm the grave woman, my namesake, is September 11th, I think 1994. I started mortuary school on September 11th, or the week of September 11th, 2011. Mm-hmm. So not only was the cemetery experience my introduction to working in death care in a professional capacity, but it was also my introduction to numerology, which is how spirit communicates with me, even in working with families.
I love that. I love that. I have such a deep sense of this, when you're working in alignment with your spirit, when you're on your own path, these synchronicities just show up only to affirm what you're already doing. And so I see that as numerology, and I see that as these synchronicities in timelines of things and in photographs, wherever it comes up for you, but trusting that and believing in that and just not pushing that away so that we can really get to our true path, right? Like understanding this is true path. This is North Star for me. Beautiful. Well, let me just walk into this other field now of ceremony and ritual with you a little bit, because I hear you've seen a lot, you've experienced a lot from many different demographics and from many different religious backgrounds, I'm sure, as you've seen ceremony being played out with families as they are going through the process of tending to and taking care of their dead one. And can you talk to how you see ceremony and ritual being a healing process for families and individuals and the role of that?
Sure. I just want to sit with that for a second, because again, I approach things from many different angles. So I'm going to answer that question in two ways. The first being in my role as an actual funeral director, caring for the deceased and the funeralization and burial process. Part of the reason, well, let's just say it plainly, funerals and all of the things that we do with the deceased are not for the deceased. They're for the living. So with that said, all of the rituals, all of the ceremony are done not necessarily to honor the deceased, as we like to frame it, but it's done to bring comfort to those that are left behind, right? What I've observed is that, especially in the past 2 years since the pandemic, what that looks like is changing, and it's changing drastically. And it's changing drastically in the sense that it's no longer traditional. It's no longer religious. It's no longer a formula. It's now opened up to spirit, because people weren't able to bury their loved ones and perform their rituals and do the things that were mandated that be done when someone dies, because we were all separated from one another. So now what does that ceremony, what does that ritual, what does that practice looks like? It looks like, how do I connect to this experience and make it meaningful for me, or make it meaningful for you? And as a professional, it's now my job not to necessarily go by the book or go by what I've experienced, but to go into the place open and naked as a sacred space and be in tune with what this person needs, what was important to the person who's passed away, what is important to this mother, this father, this wife, these children, and how do I create something sacred that allows them to celebrate this love. Now, that's as the professional in the funeral home. As the sacred grief practitioner outside of the funeral home, what do you do to honor yourself in this experience on a daily basis? Because after we've done the ceremony of laying your loved one to rest or honoring their life, how now do you navigate this journey with grief? There isn't a formula for that. There never has been. But we had the distractions easily accessible to us, like going out, partying, doing all the things that we do to keep our mind off of what we're experiencing. The world is opening up more and more every day, but what did we do with that when we were alone at home with our grief? We had to build ritual. We had to incorporate something even as simple as getting up and brushing our teeth. I think a lot of people are intimidated by the word ritual. It sounds scary and spooky and all the things that we're taught it means. But to me, ritual is simply, what am I doing to connect with this moment? What am I doing to get through this moment? What am I doing to navigate this moment? And how do I feel within these practices? So how do we build practices around this experience of grief, rituals that help us cope, help us understand, and help us move forward?
So articulate and beautifully said. Thank you. And I love that you separated them and broke them down a little bit, because as you were speaking, I was just in my heart saying, yes, yes, this is exactly true. And it is so true. What the pandemic brought was an opening of being able to receive, being able to look at something through a wholly different experience and through different eyes, which is completely needed, because there has been such a large swath of time, as you're saying, that it hasn't been looked at. And it doesn't feed the actual need of what we need as an emotional, human, spiritual being. And so just being able to stop and take pause and say, we need to resource what we need in this moment for ourselves. And ritual, absolutely. I could talk about this all day long with you because of my work in ceramics and my love of setting up ceremony and ritual throughout my days as well. But it is so that ritual is that grounding cord that offers us a place to just stay present in our lives and in our days, and create the little practices that we really need just to ground and take care of ourselves through difficult moments and through beautiful moments. Really the recognition of that. And so I'm curious, how do you offer your clients or the people that you work with now, whether that's through courses or one-on-one, how do you offer them this ongoing sense of support through ritual and ceremony?
So again, I approach each person in each space as being sacred, because they are, right? And if something is sacred, that means you take care of it, right? Mm-hmm. I simply teach people how to take care of themselves holistically while honoring the experience that they're having. I mean, it's that simple. It's not complex. It's not complicated. I give people permission to say, I'm having an experience and I need more care right now. Because our society historically has been set up to say, keep going, keep pushing. Shit happens, get over it. Mm-hmm. You know? And we as women feel that because the majority of my clients, the majority of the families that I work with are brought to me by the maternal or feminine energy, I simply give the space for pause, or hold the space for pause. And when people pause, they have their own revelations. It's not my job to define what your experience needs to be or what it is that you need to do. I don't have those answers. I simply create safety and allow you to feel safe enough to pause and honor what it is that comes up, whether it's anger, whether it's jealousy, whether it's bitterness, whether it's feelings of betrayal, whether it's feelings of discord and, my life has looked this way up until this point, but I just don't want this anymore. And how do I navigate or pivot to reflect what I truly want? I just give people space for revelation and pause.
Ooh, so wise. Oh my gosh. And so true. I just, Amanda and I, in the work that we do with Spirit Vessel, it's really creating that space. And we recognize there are no answers that we can give to people, just in the way you say, like, that is a prescription nobody can give to anyone else. And, you're batting in the wrong field if you think you can give people that healing energy that only they can give themselves. And only, you just have to give people the place in themselves, offer it to them where they can see a little bit more and wake up a little bit more into where they're needing their own healing and where their own journey's going for themselves. And we're so, enamored by your work, because we feel that, like, we are kindred with you in this way of holding space for others to do their own work and show up truly authentically in it too. It's a place where, holding a space, holding a ceremony is a way of saying, you can go through what you need to go through here. This isn't like any other time or any day. It's, it's your own little, like, therapy session in a way of sorts. Beautiful. So we have one last question for you, and this can go any way you want. We're just really excited because we know that you are a very multi-versed woman in all of your modalities and all your offerings. But we want to know, what is inspiring you regarding the direction of your industry or any projects that you're working on at the moment?
What is inspiring me? I'm going to be so transparent. I am at the point can I curse?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I am at the point where I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna do this the way the spirit is leading me to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not turning back at all. So fear is really inspiring me right now. And when I say fear, it's not that I'm afraid of death or afraid of anything. It's just you work so hard to get to a point where you're recognized for what you do. And then you realize the way or the system in which you've been doing it is so jacked up. And it's like, I don't want anything to do with that. So yeah, fear is inspiring me, and honestly spending a lot of time with my maternal grandmother right now. She's just inspiring me so much because she is the example of well done. And for those of you that don't know what that means, there's a verse in the Bible where I don't know who was talking to who about what, but basically they're saying that our ultimate goal in life is to get to God, spirit, source, energy, the universe. And for that energy to say to us, well done. Welcome, basically. And I'm just learning so much. I'm sitting in her home that she and my grandfather built 50 years ago on their land, which they've had for even longer. And it's just like, this takes consistency. This takes dedication. This takes vision. This takes intention to have and to hold. And that is just so fucking inspiring to me right now. Mm-hmm. And it's really causing me to reflect on, what is my granddaughter going to sit on or sit in or sit around that I've created for her? And not necessarily something tangible like a house or land, but spiritually. So that's inspiring me right now.
Mm. You just inspired me. for fear to be a healthy driver in the way that you're speaking of it, as a change agent, as somebody who is going to is stepping in to revamp an industry, an idea, a field that needs so much compassion on it in a wholly different direction, so that it's not towards the transaction of things, it's truly towards the spiritual transition of things, and having the heart being placed back into this industry is, we are all just so thankful for your work and your voice and your vision. And I know I can speak for so many people in this field as well, because you're quite a leader, all of those ways. And it's so beautiful just to hear how you really bring it back to your own family, and the power that your grandmother gave you and your mother, and just this lineage that you're living out of your family, and seeing their own story feeding into yours is so gorgeous. So thank you so much for sharing this time with us today. And I just want to see if Amanda has any questions, or I think we've been both listening so intently and just seeping in all of your wisdom and all of your grace in this. So
yeah, Joèl, we know you have so many resources to offer. So where can people learn more about you?
Oh gosh, just type in the Grave Woman in Google and I'll pop up everywhere. YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. If you're interested in taking a course, thegravewoman.com, there's a tab on there that says courses. I have 10 times as many free resources as I have paid resources. So if money is an issue, or you just don't have, the resources to invest in a course right now, I have tons of information on social media and YouTube. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, for our listeners, as a reminder, if you enjoyed our conversation today, please share it on your social media, your favorite social media account, and go to spiritvessel.com/newsletter, sign up for the newsletter. You'll be notified when new conversations come out. And thank you again so much, Joèl. We're so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah, such a pleasure to meet you. Thanks.